Good afternoon, everyone. We are just experiencing a minor technical issue, and some of our guests are unable to access the webinar. So just give us 2 minutes and we'll pop right back online and get this very intense topic started as soon as possible. Thank you. Hello and good afternoon again. I am hoping that everyone was able to connect either through StreamYard or our YouTube channel. I'm very sorry for the issues there. This is my first webinar in quite a while. So yeah, I'm here without a moderator, so please bear with me. And we have a lot of information to get through today. We'll start with, my name is Marie Sweeney. I've been with cannabis licensed experts for going on a little over 3 years now, and I've been in the cannabis industry for far longer than that. Basically, what I do is all the boring stuff no one else wants to do so that you guys can grow more wonderful product and create more wonderful products, and we're here to support and make sure that Health Canada doesn't get mad at anyone. Or when looking at GACP and GMP, we're looking at other nations as well. Um, I just wanted to take a quick moment and thank Joanne for letting everyone know how to connect once we realized we were having those technical issues. Thank you, Joanne. You saved us. So let's just get started today. If there are any issues with sound or anything, please type that into the chat and I will respond as quickly as possible in there. Please feel free to put any questions into the chat as well. I'm going to do my best to keep this within an hour and answer everybody's questions towards the end of the episode. And if we are unable to get to everyone's questions, then you can absolutely email me right here. It's on the screen. All right, so without further ado, GACP and GMP for the Canadian cannabis industry, and what does this mean for your business? So who and what are GMP and GACP for? Basic, easiest way to split this down is to look at GACP, which is good agricultural collection practices. So that's going to relate to all growing and harvesting of flower. And then our GMP relates to all post-harvest activities or processing activities. So what is the purpose of a GACP and a GMP practice? Mainly safety, potency, identify, purity, and the quality of your product. This is taking GMP and putting it on speed. So under GACP and GMP, cannabis materials are considered medicinal products, and therefore they must be produced in this highly regulated environment and go above and beyond Canada's Good Production Practices, or GPP. Pharmaceutical manufacturers must demonstrate to government, medical professionals, and their patients that their products are safe and appropriate for use. It also means contract manufacturing companies also have to meet these requirements of a drug license holder. We will get into that in our next webinar on drug establishment licenses, which are ways in which to achieve your GMP standards for international trade. So we're going to start with our GACP, Good Agricultural Collection Practices, and what this entails. So GACP, again, it's a quality system and guideline for good agricultural and collection practices for the starting materials of herbal origin. So this is based on a lot of the European natural foraging for a lot of essential oils and other plant medicines that are quite popular and common throughout Europe and the rest of the world. North America, we're catching up. But this guideline was developed and accepted by the European Medical Establishment Association and its associated nations, although each country is going to have its specific requirements that have to be taken into consideration when you're doing business outside of Canada. This is your starting point. So these processes are going to help identify any critical production steps that are needed to ensure good quality medicine and medicinal plant production. So to ensure your consumer safety, you're going to do this by ensuring that the plants are produced hygienically, thereby reducing any concerns of microorganisms to the minimal amount that we can. We know we're dealing with plants, so nothing's going to be 100% zero. That's for Advil factories, not for us, but as low as possible. And then the plants, we want to ensure that they are handled in a way that will not adversely affect the materials during cultivation, harvesting, processing, or storage. So again, we're looking at the overall quality of these products. So the elements of a GACP plan, sorry, I have lots of acronyms coming at us. Quality assurance, number one. Then we are also looking at how you are training and educating your personnel, how you're maintaining your buildings and facilities, your equipment, are you validating it, and how is it being maintained throughout the process, your documentation. Biggest thing with GACP and GMP, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So make sure you document everything to a T all the time, no backdating. Seeds and propagation materials, cultivation practices, the collection practices, the harvest, Processing, if you're not doing a finished product, there are processing that does fall under GACP. Packaging, and then your storage and your distribution channels are also relevant. So we'll get a little bit deeper into some of these topics. So what does that quality assurance heading entail? We're looking at the application of the guidelines from licensed producers, traders, and people working in operations or the processing. It's anything that is written into an agreement between the producer and buyers related to quality. It includes your test limits based on recognized national specifications, be it the pesticide limits and heavy metals limits here in Canada. To every country, again, has their own, so making sure that you are meeting all those requirements if you are considering international trade. Then we have our personnel and our education. This is going to include the SOP for food hygiene requirements, personal hygiene, including workers in the field for outdoor grows, training related to hygiene, how you're gowning, how you're gloving, how you're taking those off at the end of the day. Are you wearing masks? Do you have anything in place, or someone is ill or has cuts and scrapes that may interfere with the collection of and keeping those microorganisms at a minimum. Then we also need SOPs for addressing personnel with infectious diseases, like I just said, and collectors must have and record the proof that you have that appropriate plant knowledge. So what are your training practices so that people know what they are doing when they're out in the field or they're in that grow room making assessments, deciding when to harvest, deciding if something has a mite on it and how you're going to address those issues. Then we have our buildings and facilities. Number one, proper HVAC. Make sure you have that ventilation in there. Then we want to clean and sanitize space. You want to ensure that that space is only used for production and growing of medicinal plants and the resulting materials, so your oils and whatnot, buds, cured, whatever those things may be. They need to be protected from pests, including insects and rodents. Facilities have pest control measures in place and making sure that they are monitored, maintained, and documented, and ensuring that the staff that are required or responsible for these activities are properly qualified and trained. And again, you have the documentation to prove that. What else do we have? Change rooms. So when you're looking at GPP, some of these our operations aren't required to have change rooms or washroom facilities for our staff. Not going to happen under GACP. So if you don't have one, start planning on how you're going to fit one into your operation. This allows people to maintain personal and plant hygiene. If they don't have a place to get cleaned up, how are they going to make sure that your plants aren't getting grossed out? And then we also have to look at packaged materials, how you're storing those materials, how you're cleaning those materials, how you're using those materials. Now, moving into equipment and documentation. Equipment, it needs to be made in a way that will avoid cross-contamination, and it has to be used in a way that will avoid cross-contamination. So for those of you who have processing operations, if you've done a HACCP or a PCP plan, like a hazardous identification system or a preventative control plan, you're aware of some of how these assessments are done for equipment and the sanitation program that will go with it. You want to make sure anything that you're using to consider weights is properly calibrated and done on a regular basis, oiled in a good working condition, regularly serviced by qualified individuals, clean. Just make sure things are clean, especially your machines and tool parts. If anything comes in direct contact with the machines, or if, say, there's hinges or things that follicles and whatnot could get sucked into, you do also want to make sure that things are getting taken apart and cleaned and properly maintained. Not only is it going to make sure that you're ensuring the quality of your product, it's going to make your equipment that you didn't spend a tiny penny on last longer. Then we're going to be looking at documentation. Required for all processes and procedures related to quality. Again, if it's not written down and you don't have proof, If someone comes and audits you, it never happened and they don't really care what you have to say. So just remember that. Everything written down all the time. Okay, so then we also want to make sure that there's documentation for addressing your pest and your pest control system. Um, you know, weather, we can't control it, but how are you addressing it? Do you have SOPs for severe weather? Unfortunately, what we're seeing in the States, especially through the southern states in terms of extreme weather events, and we are seeing it happening more up here in Canada as well, is how are you going to protect your operation from those type of those things? Um, and protect your staff. You want to make sure that you have a program that is going to protect all of your assets, which do include your people as well. Then we're also going to want documentation for location within a facility, what plant protection products that you are using. And again, document everything: dates, times, who, what, when, where, why, and how, always. You're going to want to ensure traceability of all your batches. This is a big one where a lot of people do think that they have that process in place. Run a dry audit within your operation and make sure you can trace that back. Traceability is highly important, especially when dealing with something that is considered medicinal. And then you're also going to want to review and document all of your cultivator and buyer contracts and audit reports and analysis. Okay, now we're moving into our seeds and our propagation material. I do apologize, I am going very quickly, but we are starting 15 minutes late today, so we'll get through the GACP and I'll slow down a little bit going through GMP processes, okay? Okay, so seed and propagation materials. Seeds and any materials, your propagated materials, for those of you new to the industry, or you're talking about your clones or tissue cultures, they must be traceable, including the origin of the plants. So what mother did they come from, or did they come from an outside source? What LP did they come from? What nursery did they come from? You're also going to want to be able to track exactly what that material is once it's in your building. So making sure that things are properly identified by cultivar, nursery, any of those specifics that you find necessary for your operations. So if you're using an organic production, they must be certified organic, otherwise you can't make the claim. So again, checks and balances all the way through. We're just taking GPP and stepping it up a little bit. Then we're also looking at starting materials. They have to be free of pests and any diseases. We are hearing a lot about things that are kind of coming in and affecting clones and seeds within the industry. So whenever you can get a lab test or some just reassurances that the product that you're acquiring for your operation is going to meet those controls, get those in there. And then we're going to want to control the segregation of cultivars during the entire process to avoid any alteration. Little personal story. I was in Jamaica last year and I've got the pleasure of visiting multiple Rasta farms. And oh my God, nothing was more fun. But it was very interesting talking to them when they're talking about how they could potentially be, selling their plants globally under their current structure. And as much as I love them, they've got, one field and they're like, that row is super lemon haze, and that row is granddaddy purple, and that row is lamb spread, and that row is, I was like, unfortunately, by the time you harvest all those plants, you can't make that claim for any of those things. So making sure that you do have segregation to prevent any cross-pollination when that's not what you're looking for is also going to help you maintain those contracts and what you have promised your buyers. And then if you're using GMOs, which we don't really have to look at within our industry, but making sure that if you are using anything that is altered or adulterated, that you are meeting your regional, your national regulations for both here in Canada as well as whoever you're trading with internationally. Then we're looking at cultivation. So acceptable SOPs are implemented depending on organic or other methods that you use. You want to make sure you have good crop husbandry and that the people who are in charge of these activities are well trained and know what they're doing. Quality of growing mediums. That should say IE, sorry there, but no sludge, no heavy metals in the soil, chemicals, pesticides, runoff from other farms if you're doing an outdoor grow. These are all things that need to be considered and recorded. And then as well, of course, plants love their water, so we want to make sure that your irrigation, including your water quality, meets your national and your local requirements, as again, any other requirements that your customers are looking for. And believe me, some of them have some pretty stringent requests. Okay, so now we're going to move into crop maintenance and plant protection. So what this entails is avoiding the application of pesticides and herbicides as much as possible. Whenever you can grow naturally or use a natural product to control that pest management, then highly recommended when working with the international market. There are a lot of pesticides approved in North America that are not approved anywhere else in the world. And once you start kind of looking into why, you don't want to use them anymore either. Then we're going to be looking at making sure that the products that you're using are those ones that are approved, not only just in Canada, but for where you are intending on shipping your product to. Ensuring that the staff that make those decisions and work with these materials and these substances are properly qualified, trained, and that that is documented throughout the process. Ensuring that your SOPs for treatment and harvesting schedules are outlined by a buyer and that you are following those. And then if they have recommended products that they want you to be using as well. Again, some of your buyers are going to be very, very, very specific on what they are looking for throughout the entire process. So if you are looking at doing contract grows for international trade, or even just locally, make sure that you are able to meet those requirements and those requests from your customer before getting yourself into something. Then we are going to be looking at the collection practices. Designated staff to ID and verify that the plants that you are actually harvesting are what they're asking for and looking for, and that they're ready to be done. And then if you are working in outdoor cultivation, that the collection is done per any conservation legislation that is out there, any agricultural practices that are common within your area, and ensuring the production of the growth environment to ensure ideal conditions for regeneration. There's some pretty awesome farms that I'm sure some of us are aware of that are doing crop rotation, and they've got cows and chickens and all the wonderful things on their farm as well, and they're rotating those fields to ensure that they've got the best, most loveliest soil for growing their plants. Okay, moving into harvesting activities. This is a little bit of a longer section, but again, we'll just get through it as fast as possible. So you're looking to protect plants from pests, document any use of pesticides and herbicides. Your activities cannot be delayed to avoid possible degradation. So again, we all know the importance of harvest date is harvest date, drying and curing, making sure that you're not letting bags and piles of cannabis beautiful flower just laying around because you haven't gotten enough people to get it up and hanging for the process. All of that is going to damage the quality of your plant, so you want to make sure that you are, again, doing everything you can to ensure that your product is the best product that it can be. You also want to avoid any mechanical damage or compacting. Again, squeezing them into those bags might look beautiful, not always the best way to maintain your product, especially if it hasn't been properly dried or cured. Again, you could be leading to mold or various other issues. Making sure your containers that you're using for carrying, drying, storing, all of it are properly cleaned, sanitized, and ready to be used for these products. And then making sure that when you are working in your harvest production processes is making sure that they don't come into contact with soil. Lots of microbes in soil. So yeah, making sure that they are, not hitting the ground before they are rolled into your drying and cleaning areas. Then again, you're going to want to make sure that you have the properly trained staff to ensure that your plants are actually ready to be harvested based on any specifications that you or your customers have. And again, you're going to want to look at things like those environmental factors, which may cause an adjustment to your pre-planned schedule. Again, white soil, dew, rain, high humidity, high winds in those outdoor grows. You want to make sure that you are loving your plants as much as possible, And then you want to exclude damaged or undesirable plants. So we all know things happen. None of us are perfect at all times. So going through and just being honest with ourselves so that you're not ruining an entire lot of product. And then the use of equipment that prevents soil contamination. Like, and you don't want leaking oils or, you know, machine grease or whatnot moving into soil that you may be using to harvest your or plant your next plants. Okay, processing. So processing under GACP, if you don't have a GMP, is going to include or have a bit of a Venn diagram where these activities overlap between GACP and GMP. But washing, cutting, trimming, fumigation, freezing, distillation, drying, any activities that you are doing to that plant before you're running it through another machine, or even if you are using trimming machines, that again, they are going to respect the quality of your plants and all the other fun activities behind that. And then storage and distribution, you're going to want to ensure that you have that clean, dry room, that your building has proper HVAC and airflow and humidity controls, your temperatures are controlled. If you're looking at bulk transport, making sure that you are doing that under conditions that will keep your product in its most ideal form throughout the entire process. And then fumigate against pests as necessary using trained professionals and registered chemicals. And that could apply both to transportation vehicles, your facility, anywhere where your plant is going to be. Okay, so we rushed through that part in 20 minutes. Again, if you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat and I will respond to you as soon as possible. I'm going to be flipping back between the YouTube channel and the StreamYard channel just to make sure I'm not missing anyone's questions. So, all right, looking at GMP, good manufacturing practices. It's a quality assurance approach. It does its best to guarantee that products are consistently manufactured and controlled to meet the quality standards and expectations suited for their intended use. This involves adhering to a set of guidelines recognized as generally accepted practices to ensure drug quality and effectiveness. The other thing with quality assurance approach means that with your SOPs being followed properly and your staff being trained to use those SOPs properly, that you will get those replicable results with each time you run through this process. So it's all been validated. All right, so the minimum requirements for a GMP are methods to be used in and the facilities or controls to be used for the manufacture, processing, packaging, or holding of a drug. In this case, it will be cannabis plants or cannabis product to assure that such a drug meets the requirements of the Act as to safety and has the identity and strength and meets the requirements and purity characteristics that it purports or is represented to possess. A failure to comply with any regulations set forth in the manufacture, processing, packing, or holding of a drug shall render such drug to be adulterated, and such drug, as well as the person who is responsible for the failure to comply, shall be subject to regulatory action. This is why our QAPs in the cannabis industry are security cleared. Is they are also held liable in many cases for failure to comply with any of the recommendations or rules and regulations that we are faced with on a daily basis. And just to say, it's not just your QAP. They could be looking at your RFIC, your head of security, if it looks like people are allowed into what's supposed to be a secured area or restricted area. Again, we don't love all the rules that we follow, but we got to follow them to play this game. Okay, so why are you going to implement GMPs within a cannabis facility? You've already gone through GPP, so why are we doing GMPs? Number one, quality, safety, and effectiveness must be integrated into both the processes and the products from the beginning stages. Proper manufacturing practices are essential to ensure that the quality can be effectively incorporated into products and processes, and that every step in the manufacturing process must be controlled to ensure the highest possible chance of producing an acceptable product. Okay, basic requirements for GMP. Again, I'm sorry, this is the driest topic in the world, which is why I do it, so other people can just keep growing great product that I can keep buying. But we're going to get through it, so at least you have an understanding, and then please feel free to book some time with me or shoot me any questions to get more in depth into your specific operations, I'm always happy to meet and just chat with a no pressure to do business with us in the future. Okay. So, what are the basics requirements of GMP? Manufacturing processes are clearly defined, validated, which means you've done this multiple times and have proven that it can be repeated, and then reviewed on a regular basis to ensure that compliance with specifications and consistency is happening every time. Manufacturing processes are controlled, and that changes to any process that may impact the quality are validated and implemented properly, and your staff is properly trained. SOPs are written in clear and concise language. I do find this is a section where a lot of people get a little overwhelmed, is they think it's got to use big words and it's got to be done in a very specific language and whatnot. Really, an SOP is a how-to that can be very easily understood by anyone who picks it up. That's what an SOP is for, because nobody in your building should be 100% responsible for the success of your processes. Yes, your QAP is there to monitor it all and make sure that everything is done correctly, but everyone needs to be able to properly understand and implement the SOPs relevant to their jobs. So I usually say just go through a process and actually just write it down as you're doing it. It can be tightened up and cleaned up, but that's all an SOP is. It's how you did it and how they're going to do it so that it's done the exact same way every single time. So again, we just brought it up, but all personnel need to be trained to conduct the SOPs relevant to their job and to properly document those procedures. Records are created either manually or with an instrument, i.e. a scale, your seed to sales software, whatever it is that you are using. So this is done during manufacturing to verify that all the required steps outlined in the SOP were followed and that the drug's quality and quantity meet the expectations. So your THC, your CBD, your other cannabinoids, making sure your pesticides are low and within the ranges that were outlined in your contracts or by the regulations here in Canada. And then you're going to ensure that you have records of the processes, including distribution, that they are retained properly and they can be accessed at any time, that you do have an access log to see who is accessing and using those documentation, and that you can enable a complete batch history and that traceability program. Then we're looking at minimizing risk for the quality of the product or the drug during distribution. So again, environmental controls, temperature controls if they are applicable, time things are on shelves. I know here in Canada we say we have no established expiry date, but we do know that there are ideal windows in which to move our product so that customers are getting the best version of that plant material. And then you want to have a system in place to recall those batches from sale or supply if anything is found wrong with them, or you just aren't happy with the quality of it. You are allowed to do a recall just because you're like, I don't want to put my name on that. And then complaints about a marketed drug must be examined for causes of quality defects, investigated, and that appropriate measures are taken to secure a defective drug and to prevent any reoccurrences. So then we're looking at CAPA and various other activities that your QAP is already going to be aware of. Okay, so what are the benefits of GMP compliance? One, you get to sell internationally, which we all know is kind of a big gain for all of us looking to be able to maximize our value within this industry. Then we also want to decrease sources of stress and avoid potential problems. We all know our jobs are stressful enough. Silliness isn't necessary. And then we're going to minimize the risk of product rejects or recalls. We're reducing the need for rework or reprocessing or irrigation or any of the stuff that seems to come afterwards that we are trying to correct issues. And then it's going to help maintain stable production schedules so that you can actually plan out your logistics and your sales cycles and whatnot as closely as possible. You're going to enhance the company's reputation. People recognize GMP, not just in the cannabis industry, but across all industries it just shows that you're striving to provide the best product for your customers as possible. Employee pride and satisfaction, knowing that you are working in a system that is doing everything it can to produce the best product under the best circumstances, and it improves job security. Because again, the more you are tracking and basing your operations daily on a set of standards, better chance that your job's going to be there tomorrow. You're not going to get shut down for a bad audit or anything like that. And of course, my mouse just decided to die on me. Okay, there we go. So the keys to GMP compliance. Quality is always the top priority. And I know, as someone who's worked in this field for a long time, quality and production tend to knock heads a lot. It's because the most beautiful plant in the world is not necessarily the best quality plant to go out to represent your company. You have to come together in the middle and figure out a way to keep both sides happy. Then we're looking at GMP's focuses are on preventative actions as opposed to reactive actions. Again, you want to be able to prevent any potential disruptions in your supply chains, any recalls, any unhappy customers, any unhappy staff, all of it. Preventing, always cheaper than having to deal with an issue down the line. This is one of those places where doing and then begging for forgiveness is not going to work for anybody. And then we want to make sure that people know that adhering to those GMP standards you've built out for your operation are mandatory and not optional. Everybody has to be on board to make sure that this is what works for your team. And then ensuring tasks are done correctly the first time. Again, it costs money to go back and do things again. Proper training, proper SOPs, get it right the first time, get your product to market as fast as possible. And then, as I've said several times, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So make sure you have those documentations. And now we're going to move into the 5 elements of good manufacturing practices. So we have safety, pretty self-sufficient right there. We want to make sure it's safe for human consumption. Identity, that the product is properly labeled and fully documented. Strength, so your active ingredients, your THC and CBD, are at the labeled level throughout the shelf life of the product. As we're seeing with some issues with international right now, some buyers are causing some issues for Canadian companies, we'll put it. To me, it sounded a little bit like both sides didn't have their contracts and agreements in place properly with enough checks and balances. But the last thing you want is if you are sending something overseas and it's in improper conditions on that shipment, it's going to have a different THC, THCA, CBD, and CBDA, and all the other cannabinoids will change. We all know that the longer something sits, those specs are going to change. So make sure you give yourself a range. And then you're trying to confirm and guarantee the purity of that product and that the quality meets the regulations and the results can be consistently and successfully replicated. So the 10 principles or commandments of GMPs. SOPs, draft your step-by-step procedures to ensure a controlled and consistent performance. Carefully follow those written procedures. Accurately document the work at the time of the activity to ensure compliance and traceability. Again, you can't backdate things. Do them right the first time so you're not doing corrections in the future. Then you want to validate those procedures. So prove that your procedures do what they are designed to do. So again, even with that recall, like I said, run a dry audit at your facility and make sure that that audit procedure or that recall procedure is working the way you intend it to. There's nothing wrong with doing it a first time and realizing we can tweak that, we can make it better. It's better to have you do that than, a third-party auditor. Then you also want to ensure your employees' safety, of course. The productivity and product quality are integrated into your design and construction of the site and all of your activities. Define and develop your job qualifications and descriptions. Properly maintaining facilities and equipment. Protect products and plants against any contamination, ensuring that quality is built into all of your products by using a system to control all the components and the product related processes. So your manufacturing, your labeling, packaging, drying and curing, all of it. Make sure you are building that quality system into all of your activities, and then conduct and scheduled, I don't know what I typed there, I'm sorry, but conduct scheduled self audits. And you can also do kind of impromptu ones if you kind of want to just see when your staff hasn't had time to prepare for you to show up and do a quick audit of their department or their activities. Surprise ones. It's also a really great way to catch just some of the bad habits we fall into. I like to say, you walk into the same room 100 times, you're not going to see that corner that's getting a little bit dirty, or that counter that could probably use a reseal, epoxy reseal. But if you're going in and doing that spot audit or those scheduled audits, you're going to help catch those things and deal with them before they become a bigger issue. So what does GMP encompass? Everything is the short answer, I guess. But if we want to break it down into areas, and we'll go a little bit more in depth into each of these sections as well in just a moment, but you're looking at premises, equipment, sanitation, quality control, your raw materials testing, packaging materials testing, finished product testing, samples, how you're saving those, maintaining them, what the quantities are, all that good stuff. Your records, making sure you have so many records, double records, just keep building more records. Your personnel and your personnel files, manufacturing controls, your validation programs, your documentation programs, deviation and nonconformances, complaints and recalls, and change controls. So we'll get into what each of those things means now. Okay, so your premises has to be designed, built, and maintained to address the following: proper amount of space, a clean and sanitary condition, that your sanitation and cleaning programs are effective, and that you have the proper temperature and humidity controls within your organization and your space. It is very important to segregate the operations of warehouse, packaging, labeling, quality control, and any potential lab activities that you have on site from your production areas. Again, your clean rooms, your dirty rooms, making sure that you don't have crossover that could cause contamination, and just your whole GMP program. Then you're also looking at engineering, generators, boiler rooms, making sure that those are also separated from your production areas, and that both GMP and non-GMP areas within your site are properly identified and addressed as such. So equipment, make sure that all of your equipment is properly designed for effective cleaning, that is installed in the proper location, it operates according to its intended purpose, and that you're using it for its intended purpose. It meets calibration and validation standards, and that you are regularly maintaining that equipment. Again, that's just going to help with your sanitation program, making sure you're keeping your microorganisms and any other potential contaminants out of your plant materials, and it's going to save you money in the long run as well. Okay, so sanitation. Sanitation programs are essential for meeting GMP standards because they are a key role in ensuring the safety, the identification, the strength, the purity, and the quality of our products. Your sanitation standard operating procedure, make sure it includes clear responsibilities. Who is responsible for each aspect of that sanitation program? The cleaning frequency, specify how often cleaning should be performed. Your validation process, which shows that it's the method to confirm that there's no residue. So say you're using bleach on a surface or some other slightly more corrosive cleaning agents, do you have a way to ensure that there's nothing left on those surfaces when you're done using those cleaning agents? Because they can cause contamination. And these elements are critical to maintaining a compliant and effective sanitation program. Elements for quality control, continuing into understanding what quality control actually is. So what it does is sampling and testing. So checking your materials and products to ensure that they meet those quality standards that you've previously outlined. It's your documentation, proving that you are doing testing and recording those results to ensure that you are maintaining the quality of your product, and the release, so approving and rejecting products based on the quality assessments and what your end goal was. So it matters because materials and drugs that are not used or supplied until they meet the required standards. The last thing you want is get through an entire harvest season and then you can't release that product and you are back at square one. Mistakes are costly in our industry, so making sure that you have those checks and balances throughout allows you to run a more cost-efficient operation. And then your key point, independence. The QC must be separate from manufacturing to ensure that it has unbiased decisions. Example, focusing on quality rather than cost. Again, this is where a lot of our QA, QC, production and C-suite tend to knock heads on issues. Is your C-suite's always looking to be able to maximize your dollar. Your growing and production team are looking to make the absolute, what they consider the absolute best product possible. And then your QC and QA departments are in the middle trying to come up with balance and making sure that Health Canada and all the other agencies are happy as well. So again, unity and making sure that you have these processes in place so that everyone's working together is just a happier environment for us all. Okay, elements, QA versus QC. What is quality control responsible for, whereas what is quality assurance responsible for? Quality control is in charge of lab-based activities, and quality assurance are your office-based activities. So quality control is testing to ensure the specifications are met, and then quality assurance is ensuring that the systems are correct and effective to ensure that that testing specifications are met, if that makes sense. Okay, raw material testing, specifications and pharmacopoeia. Specifications, details, descriptions for raw materials, finished products, process bulk or packaging materials. And this includes your properties, the comprehensive description of the material's characteristics, i.e. size, shape, and color, and tolerances. What are the acceptable limits for properties and qualities based on the specific testing methods? Pharmacopoeia. So we're going to touch on this briefly. It is something that your teams will have to be aware of when pursuing a GMP based on where they intend on shipping product to. So pharmacopoeia are the reference guides for medicines. Very interesting. The United States Pharmacopoeia listed cannabis until 1928, I believe, and then it was removed. It might have been a little bit later. And then the most common ones that we look at in our industry are the European, the Japanese, the United States, and the British pharmacopoeias. So whether you're dealing with EU GMPs, the NHS system, the United States, yes, we pay attention to it because they're our neighbors, but again, we're limited into what we can do for trade with them. And then the Japanese growing CBD market, definitely an interesting spot to be looking at. And then content specifications and monographs. So you're going to be including all the criteria for that medicine and then providing the qualitative and quantitative analysis of that system. And then your key takeaway from pharmacopoeias is that they are standard for medicine quality and they include essential guidelines for testing and analysis based on the region that you are working with. Okay, packaging material testing specification. So testing is guided by your SOPs and your written specifications and pharmacopoeia standards. QC testing and release, following those same procedures for raw materials and including the quality control testing and product release. Record keeping, sample maintenance, ensures that samples are properly stored. Vendor documentation maintains the records of vendor certifications and certificates of compliance to ensure your ongoing quality of packaging materials. So anytime you try and acquire packaging materials, they should have test results and lab results for you. Make sure you get those and you are using those in your decision-making process, not just your bottom dollar. And yeah, that's pharmacopoeias. And finished product testing. We're looking at the distinct procedure that you are used for testing that finished product before it finally goes out to market. The goal is to ensure that the active ingredients are correct according to the labels, that your purity is meeting your purity standards, and that your packaging is properly enclosed in the correct container and that is accurately labeled. Your key takeaway from this section is going to be finished product testing ensures that the product meets all quality and regulatory requirements, including ingredient composition, purity, packaging, and labeling. Sample retention and documentation. Again, if you don't have records of it, it didn't happen and you can't prove it. So making sure you have the proper reference samples, make sure you have enough of it, that you can do your current testing or in-house testing that you do just for your own personal quality requirements, for any future examination by companies or regulatory bodies. That includes your customers. And then keep drugs in their final packaging, except for exceptionally large packs. Sampling, follow your approved procedures for raw materials, packaging, intermediate, bulk, and finished products. Documentation, maintain your records and document, investigate any deviations from standard procedures and make sure that they are addressed. You don't want the same problem happening over and over again because you didn't do a proper CAPA. And then your key takeaway for sample retention and documentation is that your proper retention and thorough documentation ensures all necessary testing and quality checks are performed and tracked. Okay. Records. So how do you keep records for products sold? Again, this is part of your traceability and a huge part of GMP certification and approvals when doing international trade. So you want to have your master production documents, your manufacturing evidence, testing and storage documentation, documentation for your manufacturing conditions, your stability evidence and data supporting that, your finished product testing, proper documentation for your specifications, your building plans and your equipment, and then your personnel records. Maintaining comprehensive records is going to ensure that you maintain your compliance, your quality, and your traceability throughout that product lifestyle. Okay, personnel training and requirements. So what is required under GMP that's different from our GPP that many of us are currently operating under? One, detailed records, making sure you have your training records, your job descriptions, proof of competency, if they have educational documents that need to go in there, all of it. Make sure it's there. What do you include for your staff types? That's going to be your consultants, your part-time, your full-time staff, your interns, your students, your contractors, your consultants, all of us. Everybody has to be included into your GMP program. And then qualifications. Manufacturers, packagers, labels, testers, required qualifications for manufacturing quality control. Your packaging operations are required to have qualifications for packaging personnel. Your QC department must have properly qualified staff as well, in all the different departments, importing, distribution, wholesale, all of it. And then your on-site personnel, make sure that they have the appropriate practical experience, or that you are providing the appropriate training that is required for their specific jobs, and that you have the right number of people. Mistakes may get, they happen, especially when you're overworked and tired and feeling underappreciated. You're just having that day and you're the only one in. Mistakes can happen. So making sure that your staff is properly supported, and that includes the number of them. And then your GMP awareness, making sure that all personnel understand GMP principles and receive that relevant initial and ongoing training throughout their careers, whether it's updated SOPs or they're moving to a new role and there's new SOPs involved in their job. They just want to get better at their job. The better your staff is, the better your product is, always. And then just remember that to properly document and train all personnel ensures competency and compliance with your GMP standards. So manufacturing controls. Again, the main elements of this are your approved SOPs and plans, your validation plan. Again, we're looking at that documentation, manufacturing steps, distribution lists, contract manufacturing and supplier relations, and proof of their GMP compliance and documentation. And then change control and documentation. Again, making sure that you are noting any changes and deviations, that investigations are properly taken. Yes, it'll be archived on the channel, and I can also email links. Thanks, Chad. I know we're running a little bit late and people need to get back to work. So I'm going to rush through this, and then I will stay online for about 10, 15 minutes afterwards to address any specific questions as well. Okay, so validation programs. What is a validation program? It is a documented process for proving that any procedure, process, equipment, material, activity, or system consistently achieves the expected results that you are looking for. And its scope includes your equipment, your facilities, your processes, and your systems. Your key takeaways for validation programs is you want to ensure that all the aspects of your production perform reliably and meet the expected outcomes. Documentation. So what is a good documentation practice? And because of the importance of documentation, this is when I will go a little bit slower on. Really, we got to make sure our documentation is on point so that our customers, our regulatory bodies, both here in Canada and abroad, have confidence in what we are doing and that we can prove to them what we are doing. So you want to make sure that the documentation is concise, it's clean, it's to the point, you're not rambling, you're not giving too much information that really isn't valid or relevant to the situation. You want to make sure it's legible, no doctor's writing. Make sure that people, not only yourself, but your colleagues, your teammates can also read what you are recording, that is accurate, correct, and precise. Again, you can type something or write something down wrong. Make sure you're noting that. Putting it across out, you're initialing it, you're dating, and then you're doing the correction next to it. And then again, you want traceability. So you want to be able to track any actions and changes that have happened throughout the process, whether it's through just in documentation or you're documenting a change or a deviation that happened. Again, track it all, write it all, note it all, and then when you think you've done enough writing, you should probably make another note somewhere. And then the process for good documentation practices, regulatory proof. So it demonstrates the compliance with the regulations to the regulators and your customers, and it's investigative support. So it provides a basis for investigating complaints or any adverse reactions that may happen. Good documentation practices ensure that all records are clear, accurate, and reliable, and it supports regulatory compliance and effective problem solving. Again, doing it correct once definitely helps us maintain our budgets and our timelines throughout any operation. Okay, deviations and nonconformances. We know they're going to happen. Even the best run operations will always end up having a deviation or a nonconformance. Sometimes they were controllable, sometimes they weren't. So what is a nonconformance? It's an unexpected action, occurrence, or a deviation from your established process or procedure that could affect the product quality. Basically, think nonconformance, nonconformity equals a deviation. Some examples would be your equipment fails, someone's not following their SOP correctly, the humidity conditions were not met, or there was an HVAC issue over the night or over the weekend, and it did change your humidity or your temperature, your environments. Reporting and investigating. So you have to report your nonconformances using the appropriate forms, which will be defined in your SOPs. Investigate as a team to find that root cause, and then the QA must approve any of the product's quality and provide any documentation and your timelines. So you want to ensure that everything is done in a timely manner when you investigate. The longer you let something go, the worse it's going to run throughout your operation. So making sure that you have prompt, such a weird word, but you have prompt control measures. You have things that will trigger a report or an investigation if a deviation or a nonconformance is identified. So making sure you're properly reporting, investigating, and documenting any nonconformances to maintain product quality and meet regulatory expectations. I know a lot of people get really worried about being audited and people seeing that you had a deviation or a nonconformance. They happen. Nothing in life is perfect, and your auditors and your inspectors are going to know that. What they want to know, more importantly, is did you address why that deviation happened and what steps you've taken to make sure it doesn't happen again. Complaints and recalls. So, what is a quality complaint? It is any communication alleging issues with the identity, the quality, the durability, the reliability, the safety, the effectiveness, the labeling, the packaging, or the performance of a product after distribution. So the responsibilities under complaints and recalls are going to be your QA investigates complaints, determines the corrective actions, and maintains the documentation for each complaint. Your sales and export team are going to maintain detailed, accessible records 24/7 to track product distribution. Your overall company staff are going to forward all proper complaints through your defined SOPs to the QA department, and then the QA department is responsible for ensuring that all staff on the facility are properly trained to handle the complaint process and that review process. So your recall procedures, top 3 points are making sure that you have the proper documentation in place so that you can make an immediate notification, the 72 follow-up, and the 30-day result. This is something that is defined and required both when under Canadian regulations as well as international regulations. Your recall evaluation, so you need to make sure that you have that proper documentation gathered and assessed for all the information on the potential health risks before initiating a proper recall, and then your regulatory assessment. So your Health Canada, FDA, the European Medical Association, they will evaluate those health hazards associated with the recall and make their final rulings on things as well. So you want to make sure that your complaint management and recall procedures are on point. And this helps maintaining your product quality and regulatory compliance, both here in Canada and abroad. Change controls. We're getting there, people, I swear. So the definition of a change control is it's a formal quality system to manage changes impacting product quality and ensuring these are you're documented, communicated, evaluated, implemented, and reported as necessary. So the process for doing this is going to be to identify the need for the change, initiate the change process, evaluate and approve, assess the change, implement the change, reevaluate to make sure that that change was effective, and then your regulatory notification would inform regulatory authorities of any changes that are required. Um, Really, what this does is ensures that all modifications are managed systematically to maintain product quality and regulatory compliance. All right. Thank you all for sitting through some pretty dry material. If any of you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat. Like I said, I'll stay on for 10-15 minutes to address any questions or concerns. Alternatively, if you have to run back to work, please feel free just to email at info@cannabislicenseexperts.com, or I know the majority of you have my direct email from your invitations as well. So feel free to email me directly if you're not tired of hearing me talk. You're very welcome, Mallory. Like I said, I'll stay online for a few more minutes to answer any questions if anybody has any. I know we covered a lot of material in 45 minutes, an hour there. So if you're just feeling like brains are marshmallows, then I completely understand, and feel free to just email me any questions after the session. Jason, we are looking at hosting them monthly around the same date each month. I believe our next one will be covering, it's a good question because I have to write it still. I believe we're covering either drug establishment licenses or for processors who are looking to implement an NHP or natural health product site license into their facility to maximize um, return on their space. But we'll definitely make sure you get the annoying number of emails letting you know that the webinar is upcoming, and then we'll also have it posted to our socials as well. You're very welcome, Jason. All right, I think I have kind of pooped out everybody's minds today with a whole lot of processes that you're going to be considering moving forward. As I said, the recording will be available on our YouTube channel. We'll also be sending out links to the StreamYard recording for people in the next few days. We'll probably edit out the technical issues we had at the beginning, so we'll tighten that up and we'll make sure everybody has access to that in the very coming future. So I will sign off. Thank you again for everyone attending today. For more information, again, feel free to email me at info@cannabislicenseexperts.com, or you can just hit reply on the invite to the webinar as well, because those will go directly to my inbox. Please feel free to reach out. I do love my job and I will chat with anyone about all of these topics. All right. Thank you again, and I hope you are all having a marvelous day and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.